The state-by-state breakdown of these numbers as they begin to come in, the ones in brackets, of course, are the additions as of today. When we look at the East Coast is the one we get updated first of all. Queensland 5, New South Wales 6 and Victoria 7 additional cases. So it's going to be bigger than yesterday's 13, but still pretty low numbers, all single digits from the three biggest states. We'll continue to update as the other states and territories come in. As for the coronavirus curve, as I mentioned, yesterday was the lowest we've had for quite some time, getting down to 13. If it stays that low, even gets a bit lower for a protracted period of time, that would be when we'd really be starting to talk about easing restrictions and how that happens. But it does need to happen still for quite some time. The big question as well, if it gets really low, is will they be tempted to try to go for an eradication, even though that wasn't the original intention? If it could be achieved via not a complete economic lockdown, well, why not, given what's happened in Singapore? First of all, as we look at these different figures, this is just the broad ones, 2.4 million cases, 645,000 recovered, 170,000 deaths now, so increasing at a pretty fast rate. Continent by continent breakdown, which has told us the story of Asia, yes, being the first country affected, but the least affected. Europe, of course, swept through Europe really quickly, but now North America quickly gaining on Europe in terms of cases, albeit still quite a way behind on deaths. There are more than 2.4 million cases globally. More than 170,000 people now have been killed. The US oil market, in a fascinating off-branch to all of this, has crashed into negative territory now. Several countries have begun easing their coronavirus restrictions. Meanwhile, the Spanish death rate has continued to fall. Nearly 400 fatalities overnight. The country has called for the EU to provide the worst-hit countries with more than $2.5 trillion. And Singapore has suffered its worst day for the third day in a row, recording more than 1,400 new cases. So continuing on, that's not going so well, the easing of restrictions. The World Health Organization has stressed no information has been hidden from the United States during the outbreak, following criticism from Donald Trump. Taking a look at the numbers around the world, the number of new cases overnight, first of all, in the USA by far now leading this new case, is clearly the epicentre right now, ahead of the UK. Turkey, unfortunately, surging up that leaderboard, I guess you'd call it, Russia, and then France and Italy a little bit lower now, with Brazil also being represented. Another interesting thing to look at the moment is the number of active cases, so factoring in people that have actually recovered, and that means you can see Italy a lot lower compared to the US, where really we're beginning to hit, perhaps we've had the peak in the US, but a strong watch on some other states, and you can see the rest of Western Europe still highly represented, but the US just so far and above of those active cases, so that factors in people that have recovered.